Hello, I hope you are doing well. My name is Jacqueline Vino from Galasso Learning Solutions, and welcome to the Genuine Learning blog. Today, we are going to talk about some interesting developments. So the AICPA's Financial Reporting Executive Committee has actually issued some early working drafts for chapters 8 and 9, which are going to be used to update an AICPA Accounting and Valuation guide. So this project is still very much in its earlier stages, just because right now we only have a working draft from them, but the draft does provide some guidance for a couple of different parties, such as financial statement preparers, independent auditors, and also valuation specialists. So what we are going to do today is talk a little bit about this valuation guide and what are some of the updates that we can expect from chapters 8 and 9. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So just to give you some background information on this guide that's being updated, as I mentioned, this is an AICPA Valuation and Accounting Guide. The one that is being updated is the valuation of privately held company equity securities issued as compensation. So the working drafts for chapters 8 and 9 were released by FINREC on June 20th of 2024 this year. And right now they are currently seeking feedback on these working drafts. So they are open for public comment, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the last slide. So basically, what is the whole point of doing this? So FINREC is really trying to tackle updating this accounting and valuation guide in a couple of different parts. So the working drafts from chapters 8 and 9, they're really kind of the first part in some broader updates that are going to be happening in the future. So what they are trying to do is update the old 2013 edition of this guide, and they're just trying to update it for more modern times. And that's what makes the A&A world so exciting, right? That's one of the beauties of being a CPA. Things are always changing. There's always lots of exciting things going on, lots of new things to learn. And I also did want to just briefly mention that FINREC actually worked on this project with the Equity Securities Task Force to try to develop the working drafts of chapters 8 and chapters 9. And as I mentioned previously, the release of these two chapters really is the first step in some pretty significant enhancements that are going to be coming to this guide in the future. So there's future chapters that are going to really specifically address different valuation methodologies, including valuations and some pretty complex capital structures as well. So definitely lots of exciting new chapters to come. This really is kind of like phase 1 of this larger project. I also did want to note that the scope of this guidance is limited to US GAAP. So for example, if we have some private company equity securities issued as compensation for tax purposes, well, the guide is not really intended to address the valuation for that. So what are some of the primary updates from chapter 8? So just to give you some background on this, first we need to talk a little bit about primary and secondary transactions. So what is a primary transaction? Basically, this is the original issuance of some private company, equity securities or whatever that might be, debt instruments to an investor, right? So anytime there's an original issuance of that security from the private company to the investor. And of course, this is other than in a public offering. So this is typically done for a number of reasons, right? Just to raise funds, or maybe it's in connection with other negotiations. Now, on the other hand, we also have secondary transactions. So once that first primary transaction happens, right, the securities are issued by the private company to a specific investor. That doesn't mean that that investor is always going to hold on to that security, right? What they can do is they can go ahead and go on a secondary market where they trade with other investors, they try to sell that security. Just because they purchase that security initially in a primary transaction, right, doesn't mean that we're always going to have that. So we have primary transactions, right, that is that initial issuance, and then we have secondary, right, any transaction that happens after the fact, right, after that primary transaction. So that is all well and good, but what are some of the updates from chapter 8 of this guide? The primary purpose of this is chapter 8 is going to provide a framework for trying to calibrate the fair value of the equity securities underlying stock-based compensation awards, right? So, and this is for various transactions. This is for those primary transactions. This is for secondary transactions, or perhaps the private company wants to repurchase some of its securities as well, right? So basically, that's what it's going to do. Chapter 8 is going to provide a framework for all of these various situations. Additionally, we have Chapter 9 here. So Chapter 9 has selected accounting and disclosure matters. So as we previously mentioned, kind of getting into what are some of those secondary transactions, one of the updates from proposed working draft of Chapter 9 is that these secondary transactions or any repurchases of those securities basically are going to be assessed under ASC 718, right? So this is compensation, stock compensation in the FASB codification. So basically they're telling us how to handle the accounting for those types of transactions. And in addition, Chapter 9 does expand a little bit more on some of these disclosure considerations as well. So definitely referring us back to the codification for how to account for those transactions and what are some of those disclosure considerations that we want to be thinking about as well. And if you are interested in commenting, please submit your comments back to the AICPA by September 20th of 2024. So as I mentioned, this is currently a working draft, right? They are looking for comments. They do want stakeholder feedback. So if you are interested, we definitely encourage you to do so. And we also have the email where the comments need to be submitted to. And that's all that we have for today's Genuine Learning blog. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, my name is Jacqueline Vino from Galasso Learning Solutions, and I hope to see you on a future blog. And I also hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.